Jake Miller was the kind of guy you'd trust with your life. A 35-year-old software engineer in Seattle, he had a knack for solving problems. Whether it was debugging a tricky line of code or planning a surprise weekend getaway for his wife, Emma. His colleagues at TechWave admired his precision, and his friends envied his calm, steady approach to life. Jake wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. He was the guy who showed up, did the work, and always had your back. And for the last 8 years, he believed Emma was the same. Emma, 33, was a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital, known for her warmth and tireless dedication. Parents loved her for the way she calmed their kids during scary procedures, and Jake loved her for the way she'd collapse into his arms after a 12-hour shift, still finding energy to laugh about some silly moment from her day. Their marriage wasn't a fireworks show, but it was solid, built on shared routines, mutual respect, and a scruffy golden retriever named Max who greeted Jake at the door every evening. To the outside world, they were the perfect team. To Jake, they were home. That Thursday started like any other. Jake wrapped up a meeting at TechWave, where he'd spent the morning untangling a server issue that had the whole team stumped. He was good at that, seeing patterns where others saw chaos. By noon, he was already thinking about Emma's favorite almond latte from the coffee shop near their Capitol Hill apartment. She'd been pulling extra shifts lately, covering for a colleague on leave, and Jake figured a small gesture would brighten her day. He texted her, "Grabbing your latte. Home by 6. Her reply came quick, "You're the best." Yep, 6-ish. Simple, familiar, the kind of exchange they'd had 1,000 times. When Jake walked through the door, Max bounded over, tail wagging like a metronome. Emma was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for stir-fry, her phone buzzing on the counter. Jake set the latte down and leaned against the doorway, watching her for a moment. She didn't notice him at first, her focus on the cutting board, but something fell off. Her movements were mechanical, her shoulders tense, like she was bracing for something. Jake brushed it off. Long shifts did that to her sometimes. He crossed the room, gave Max a quick pat, and kissed Emma's temple. "Rough day?" he asked. She flinched slightly, just enough for Jake to notice. "Yeah, just swamped," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Thanks for the coffee." Her voice was flat, not the usual warmth he was used to. Jake's gut tightened, but he didn't push. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the counter, scrolling through emails while Emma cooked. The silence wasn't unusual. They often decompressed quietly after work, but tonight it felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Dinner was ready in 20 minutes, and they sat at the small dining table, Max curled up nearby. Jake talked about his day, the server fix, a new project his boss was pitching. Emma nodded along, but her responses were short, distracted. Then, out of nowhere, she set her fork down and said, "Ethan's in town. I was thinking of grabbing drinks with him tomorrow." Jake's hand paused mid-bite. Ethan Carter. The name wasn't new, but Emma rarely mentioned him. An old college friend, someone she dated briefly before Jake. She'd always downplayed it, saying they'd stayed friends but drifted apart. Jake had never thought much of it, until now. The way she said it, casual but careful, set off an alarm in his head. "Ethan, huh?" he said, keeping his tone light. "What's he in town for?" Emma shrugged, poking at her plate. "Just visiting, I think. Said he's here for a conference. Thought it'd be nice to catch up." She glanced at him, then away, too fast. Jake's years of debugging code had honed his ability to spot anomalies, and this was one. Her words were rehearsed, her body language guarded. He didn't like it, but he wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. "Cool," he said, forcing a smile. "Where are you meeting?" "Oh, I don't know yet," she said too quickly. "Probably just some bar downtown. Nothing big." She stood, clearing her plate, and changed the subject to Max's vet appointment. Jake let it slide, but his mind was already working, cataloging the moment. The flinch, the vague answers, the way her phone stayed face down on the counter all night. The next day, Jake couldn't shake the feeling. At work, he was distracted, missing a typo in a script that a junior dev caught. His focus kept drifting to Emma, to Ethan, to that sudden mention of drinks. By 3 p.m., he texted her, "Have fun tonight. What time you back?" No reply. An hour later, still nothing. That wasn't like her. Emma always texted back, even if it was just a quick emoji. By 6 p.m., he called, but it went to voicemail. He told himself she was busy, caught up in a shift, but the unease grew. When Emma got home at 10 p.m., Jake was on the couch, Max sprawled across his lap. She looked tired but composed, her hair slightly messy, like she'd been out in the wind. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag. "Sorry, crazy day. I ended up skipping drinks with Ethan." "Too wipe." Jake nodded, watching her closely. "No witties. How was work?" "Same old," she said, heading to the bedroom. "I am gonna crash." She didn't mention Ethan again, didn't offer details, and Jake didn't ask. But as she disappeared down the hall, he noticed her phone was still clutched in her hand, screen dark. He waited until she was in the shower, then picked up Max's leash for a quick walk. Outside, under the glow of a streetlight, he opened his phone and did something he'd never done before. He checked Emma's location on the app they shared for safety. She hadn't been at the hospital all evening. She'd been downtown, near a bar called the Rusty Anchor. Jake's heart sank. He wasn't a jealous guy, never had been. But this wasn't jealousy. It was a pattern emerging, one he couldn't ignore. Back home, he sat in the dark, Max snoring beside him, and made a decision. He wasn't going to confront her yet. Jake was a problem solver, and problems needed data. Tomorrow, he'd call a private investigator. Not because he wanted to catch her, but because he needed to know if the life he'd built with Emma was still real, or if it had been a lie all along. Jake Miller wasn't the type to act on gut feelings alone. As a software engineer, he lived by logic, piecing together solutions from raw data. But after discovering Emma's lie about her whereabouts, logic wasn't enough to quiet the storm in his chest. She claimed she skipped drinks with Ethan Carter, yet her phone's location pinned her downtown at the Rusty Anchor. Jake didn't sleep much that night, his mind running loops like a program stuck on a bug. By morning, he knew he needed answers, hard evidence, not assumptions. Friday started with a call to a private investigator named Carla Reyes, recommended by a co-worker who'd used her for a business dispute. Carla's voice was brisk, professional, no nonsense. "Give me the basics," she said. Jake explained Emma's sudden mention of Ethan, the dodged texts, the location discrepancy. He kept it factual, no emotion, like he was reporting a system crash. Carla agreed to start immediately, promising a preliminary report in 48 hours. "Don't confront her yet," she advised. "Let me get you the full picture." Jake hung up, feeling both relieved and sick. He was crossing a line, but staying in the dark wasn't an option. At work, Jake threw himself into a new project, a cloud migration that demanded focus. But every ping of his phone made him flinch, expecting Carla's update or another vague text from Emma. She'd left early for her shift, leaving a note. "Long day, don't wait up." No heart emoji, no warmth. Jake stared at the note, then pocketed it. Evidence, he thought. He hated that his marriage was turning into a case file, but he couldn't stop now. By Saturday evening, Carla emailed a brief update, tailing subject. "Activity noted. Full report tomorrow." Jake didn't know what activity meant, but it twisted his gut. Emma came home late, claiming a co-worker's birthday drinks after work. She was chatty, overly so, asking about Jake's day like nothing was wrong. But her phone stayed in her bag, and she avoided leaving it unattended. Jake played along, keeping his voice steady, but he noticed her laugh was forced, her eyes darting to her bag when she thought he wasn't looking. Sunday morning, Carla met Jake at a quiet coffee shop in Fremont. She slid a thin folder across the table. "This is what I have so far," she said. Jake opened it, his hands steady despite the adrenaline. Inside were time-stamped photos. Emma and a man, Ethan he assumed, outside the Rusty Anchor, laughing, her hand on his arm. Another shot showed them at a small cafe in Belltown. Heads close, Emma's phone nowhere in sight. The timestamps matched nights she'd claimed to be at the hospital. Carla's notes detailed Ethan's identity. 34, a marketing consultant, in Seattle for a 3-month contract. Married, no kids. "They're careful," Carla said. "No public displays beyond casual touch. But they're meeting too often for it to be platonic." Jake's throat tightened, but he kept reading. A final page listed locations. A hotel in South Lake Union, where Emma's car was parked for 2 hours Thursday night. No photos from inside. Carla couldn't access the lobby, but the implication was clear. Jake closed the folder, his mind racing. "What's next?" he asked. Carla leaned forward. "I can keep digging. Get more specifics, maybe texts or emails if you want to go deeper. Or you can take this and decide your move." Jake thanked her, paid the invoice, and left, the folder burning in his bag. Back home, Emma was at the hospital, or so she said. Jake sat on the couch, Max at his feet, and opened the folder again. The photos stared back, each one a crack in the life he'd built. He wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. He needed to be sure to have a plan. That's when he thought of Ethan's wife. If Ethan was married, she deserved to know. A quick search on LinkedIn found Sarah Carter, a 36-year-old marketing exec based in Portland. Her profile photo showed a confident woman, nothing like the betrayed spouse Jake now imagined. He hesitated, then sent a message. "Hi, Sarah. I'm Jake Miller. I need to talk about your husband, Ethan. It's important." He kept it vague, professional, unsure if she'd respond. To his surprise, Sarah replied within hours, agreeing to a video call that evening. Where her face appeared on his laptop screen, she looked composed but wary. "What's this about?" she asked. Jake laid it out. Emma's lies, the photos, the hotel. Sarah listened, her expression hardening. When he finished, she exhaled sharply. "I suspected something," she said. "Ethan's been distant, taking these work trips to Seattle. I didn't want to believe it." She paused, then added, "I'm coming up tomorrow. We need to handle this together." Jake agreed, a strange relief washing over him. He wasn't alone in this anymore. Sarah suggested they meet at a diner near Pike Place Market to strategize. "No rash moves," she said. "We do this smart." Jake admired her clarity, her resolve. They set a time, and he closed the laptop, Max nudging his hand for attention. For the first time in days, Jake felt a spark of control. He wasn't just reacting. He was building case, step by step. That night, Emma came home at midnight, claiming an emergency surgery. Jake noticed her hair was loose, not in the usual hospital bun, and her scrubs looked too clean for a chaotic shift. He didn't comment, just said goodnight and retreated to the guest room, citing a headache. Alone, he pulled out Carla's folder and added note. Sunday, 12:03 a.m., loose hair, clean scrubs. He was collecting data, but it wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about reclaiming his dignity, about refusing to be the fool in her story. Monday morning, Jake met Sarah at the diner. She was direct, no small talk, and brought her own evidence. Ethan's credit card statement showing charges at Seattle hotels and restaurants. Together, they mapped out a plan. They'd confront Emma and Ethan, but not in private, too easy for lies to slip through. They needed a public setting, somewhere the cheaters couldn't dodge the truth. Sarah suggested a restaurant, a place where they could control the narrative. Jake liked the idea. They chose the Harbor Bistro, a trendy spot downtown, and booked a table for Friday night. The plan was simple. Invite Emma and Ethan separately, then present the evidence in front of each other. As Jake drove home, his phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Out with coworkers tonight, back late." Jake didn't reply. He knew she wasn't with coworkers. Carla had texted earlier, confirming Emma was at a cafe with Ethan again. Jake gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The betrayal stung, but the plan gave him focus. He wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a man with a purpose. And by Friday, Emma and Ethan would face the consequences of their lies. Jake Miller spent the week before Friday like a coder debugging a critical system. Methodical, focused, every move calculated. His plan with Sarah Carter to confront their cheating spouses, Emma and Ethan, at the Harbor Bistro was locked in. The private investigator, Carla Reyes, delivered a final batch of evidence Thursday, a video of Emma and Ethan entering a boutique hotel in Queen and timestamped 2 days prior. Jake watched it once, jaw tight, then saved it to a tablet. He didn't need to see it again. The proof was undeniable, and now it was about execution. Sarah arrived in Seattle Thursday night, texting Jake to confirm their meeting at a coffee shop Friday morning. Over black coffee, they finalized details. Sarah had booked a separate table at the bistro, strategically positioned to face the entrance. Jake would invite Emma for a date night to reconnect, while Sarah would tell Ethan she was in town for a surprise dinner. The tablet with Carla's evidence, photos, texts, and the hotel video would be their weapon. "No yelling, no chaos," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We hit them with the truth and walk away." Jake nodded, admiring her resolve. They were allies in a shared wound, bound by a need for justice. Jake texted Emma at noon. "Let's do dinner tonight. Harbor Bistro, 7 p.m. Miss you." Her reply came fast. "Sounds perfect. Love you." The word stung, but Jake pushed the feeling down. He spent the afternoon tying up loose ends at TechWave, handing off a project to a colleague. His boss noticed his distraction, but Jake brushed it off with a vague excuse about family matters. By 5 p.m., he was home, walking Max, the golden retriever, oblivious to the storm brewing. Jake crouched, scratching Muck's ears. "Wish me luck, buddy," he muttered, then headed out. At the bistro, Jake arrived early, securing their table near the window. The restaurant buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the hum of a Friday night crowd. Sarah was already seated across the room, her back to the wall, tablet ready. They exchanged a subtle nod, a signal everything was set. Jake's pulse raced, but he kept his expression neutral, scanning the menu like any other diner. At 6:55 p.m., Ethan walked in, glancing around for Sarah. He looked relaxed, unaware, and took a seat at her table. Jake's grip tightened on his water glass, but he stayed calm. Emma arrived at 7:02, her steps quick as she spotted Jake. She slid into the chair across from him, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is nice," she said, glancing at the menu. "Been a while since we did this." Jake nodded, playing along. "Yeah, thought we needed it." Their small talk was strained, Emma's phone staying in her purse, a new habit Jake had clocked weeks ago. Across the room, Sarah and Ethan were talking, their voices low but tense. Jake caught Sarah's eye. She was ready. At 7:15, Sarah gave the signal, a slight tilt of her head. Jake leaned forward, his voice low. "Emma, there's something we need to talk about." She frowned, sensing the shift. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone cautious. Jake pulled the tablet from his bag, setting it between them. "This," he said, tapping the screen to start the video. The footage played, Emma and Ethan at the Queen and Hotel, her hand on his arm, both laughing as they entered. Emma's face drained of color, her hands frozen on the table. Before she could speak, Sarah stood, crossing the room with Ethan trailing, confused. She stopped at Jake's table, tablet in hand, and faced Emma and Ethan. "You two know each other, right?" Sarah said, her voice cutting through the restaurant's hum. Heads turned, sensing drama. Ethan stammered, "Sarah, what's going on?" Sarah ignored him, tapping her tablet. Photos flashed. Emma and Ethan at the Rusty Anchor, a cafe, a motel. The final blow was a text exchange Carla had pulled from Ethan's phone. Emma writing, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you already." Emma's mouth opened, but no words came. Ethan shifted, avoiding eye contact, his hands stuffed in his pockets. The restaurant grew quieter, waitstaff pausing, patrons whispering. Jake stood, his voice calm but firm. 8 years, Emma. I trusted you. You made me a fool." He turned to Ethan. "And you? You had a wife who deserved better." Sarah stepped forward, her gaze locked on Ethan. "We're done," she said, then faced Emma. "You're not the victim here. You chose this." Emma's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. "Jake, I can explain," she started, her voice trembling. Jake shook his head. "Don't. It's over." He slid the tablet back into his bag, the evidence no longer needed. Sarah set hers on the table, the video looping silently, and walked toward the exit. Jake followed, pausing only to drop cash for the untouched drinks. The crowd parted, their stares heavy on Emma and Ethan, who stood frozen, exposed. Outside, Jake and Sarah stood under a streetlight, the cool Seattle air grounding them. "You okay?" Sarah asked. Jake exhaled, the weight of months lifting slightly. "Not yet, but I will be." Sarah nodded, her own pain flickering beneath her composure. "Me too. Thanks for doing this with me." They parted ways, Sarah heading to her hotel, Jake to his car. He drove home in silence, Max greeting him with a wagging tail. Jake sank onto the couch, the confrontation replaying in his mind, not with anger, but with clarity. He'd reclaimed his truth. Emma texted an hour later. "Please, let's talk. I'm so sorry." Jake deleted it without responding. He knew she'd try again, but he was done listening to lies. The next step was practical. Divorce papers, a new apartment, a fresh start. He pulled out his laptop, searching for rentals, and felt a strange calm. The plan had worked, not because it humiliated Emma, but because it freed him. For the first time in weeks, Jake slept through the night. Max curled up beside him, the future uncertain but his own. Jake Miller woke up the morning after the confrontation at the Harbor Bistro with a clarity he hadn't felt in months. The public exposure of Emma and Ethan's affair had been surgical, leaving no room for their lies. Now, at 35, Jake faced a new reality. His 8-year marriage was over, and a life he'd built in Seattle needed rebuilding. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was ready to take control. Saturday, Jake started with practical steps. He called a divorce lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Lisa Nguyen, recommended by a colleague. Over the phone, Jake laid out the situation, including the evidence from private investigator Carla Reyes. Lisa was direct. Washington's a no-fault state, but the infidelity strengthens your position on asset division. Send me the documents. Jake emailed the photos, texts, and video, then spent the morning packing essentials, laptop, dog supplies for Max, a few books. He wasn't staying in the apartment he'd shared with Emma. By noon, he'd found a short-term rental in Ballard, a studio with enough space for him and Max. He signed a lease online and moved in that evening, leaving a note for Emma. "I'm gone. Lawyer will contact you." Emma's attempts to reach him started before he'd even unpacked. Text flooded his phone. "Jake, please, I messed up. Can we talk?" Voicemails followed, her voice shaky, promising explanations. Jake listened to one, then deleted the rest. Her words felt hollow, rehearsed, like lines from a script she hadn't earned the right to deliver. He blocked her number, not out of spite, but to protect his focus. Max nudged his hand, sensing the tension, and Jake took him for a walk along Ballard's waterfront. The crisp air and Max's eager, sniffing grounded him. This was his life now. Simple, unscripted, his to shape. Monday, Jake returned to TechWave, his software engineering job demanding enough to keep his mind occupied. He told his boss he was going through a personal transition, but kept details vague. His team noticed his quieter demeanor, but no one pried. During lunch, he met Sarah Carter at a deli near her hotel before she returned to Portland. She looked tired but resolute, her marriage to Ethan also ending. "He's begging me to stay," she said, stirring her coffee. "But I'm done. Filed for divorce this morning." Jake nodded, sharing his own progress. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, which she ignored. "What's next for you?" she asked. Jake shrugged, starting over. Maybe therapy, definitely more walks with Max. They parted with a handshake, allies turned friends, promising to stay in touch. Emma didn't stop trying. Tuesday, she showed up at TechWave's lobby, waiting by the entrance. Jake spotted her through the glass doors and took the back exit, heart pounding but resolve intact. She emailed him that night from a new account. "I know you hate me, but I need to explain. It wasn't what you think." Jake archived it without replying. Her persistence wasn't remorse. It was desperation to rewrite the narrative. He contacted Lisa, who sent Emma's lawyer a cease contact request. The legal process moved fast, with Jake pushing for a clean split. They had no kids, and the apartment lease was month to month. The only complication was Max, but Emma didn't contest custody. Jake suspected she knew she'd lose that fight. By Friday, word of the affair had spread at Seattle Children's Hospital, where Emma worked as a pediatric nurse. Jake hadn't leaked anything, but Sarah had confronted Ethan publicly on social media, tagging him in a post about trust. Hospital gossip did the rest. A friend at TechWave, whose wife was a nurse, mentioned Emma's reputation taking a hit. Coworkers whispered about her unreliability, and a supervisor questioned her focus. Jake felt no satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that actions had consequences. He focused on himself, signing up for therapy with a counselor named Dr. Patel, who specialized in life transitions. Their first session was virtual, and Jake found it easier to talk than expected. "You're grieving," Dr. Patel said. "Not just the marriage, but the version of you that trusted her." Jake took that in, committing to weekly sessions. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake settled into his new routine. He walked Max, and started running along Puget Sound, the exercise clearing his head. He reconnected with an old college friend, Nate, who invited him to a board game night. Jake went, laughing for the first time in months over a chaotic round of code names. Small moments like these, Nate's bad jokes, Max chasing seagulls, coding a side project for a kid's app, felt like stepping stones to a new life. He wasn't healed, but he was moving. Emma's final attempt came 3 weeks after the confrontation. She left a letter at Jake's old apartment, forwarded by the landlord. It was long, handwritten, admitting her affair with Ethan, claiming she'd been lost and needed validation. She offered to quit her job, move away, anything to fix them. Jake read it once, then shredded it. The letter wasn't for him. It was Emma trying to absolve herself. He called Sarah, who'd received a similar plea from Ethan. "They're grasping," Sarah said. "Let them drown in it." Jake agreed, feeling a bond with Sarah forged in sheer betrayal. Professionally, Jake thrived. His kids' coding app gained traction at TechWave, with his boss pitching it to a local school district. Personally, he leaned into therapy, unpacking how he'd ignored red flags in his marriage to preserve stability. Dr. Patel challenged him to redefine himself outside the role of husband. Jake took it seriously, signing up for a hiking group and planning a solo trip to Olympic National Park. Max stayed with Nate during the trip, and Jake spent 3 days on trails, phone off, just him and the forest. He returned lighter, ready for the next chapter. Emma's life, meanwhile, unraveled further. She took a leave from the hospital, citing stress, and moved to a friend's place in Tacoma. Jake heard this through Nate's wife, not caring enough to verify. Ethan, per Sarah, had lost a major client and was scrambling to salvage his consulting business. Their downfall wasn't Jake's goal, but it was a byproduct of their choices. He focused on his own path, knowing the divorce would finalize soon. Lisa assured him it was straightforward, with Emma agreeing to minimal assets. Jake didn't want revenge anymore. He wanted freedom. Jake Miller stood at the edge of a trail in Olympic National Park, Max panting happily at his side. It was 7 months since the confrontation at the Harbor Bistro, where he and Sarah Carter exposed their spouse's affair. At 35, Jake was no longer the software engineer defined by his marriage to Emma. He was a man rediscovering himself, step by deliberate step. The divorce had finalized 2 weeks ago, a quiet exchange of papers that severed the last legal tie to his past. Now, with the Pacific breeze against his face, Jake felt something new: freedom. The fallout from the affair had reshaped his life in ways he hadn't expected. After moving into his Ballard studio, Jake leaned into therapy with Dr. Lee, who'd replaced Dr. Patel. Their sessions dug into why Jake had clung to a faltering marriage, revealing his fear of failure. "You rebuilt yourself by choosing honesty," Dr. Lee said during their last call. Jake took that to heart, committing to living authentically. He started a side project, a coding app for kids, that TechWave greenlit for a pilot in Seattle schools. Late nights coding felt purposeful, like reclaiming a part of himself he'd neglected. Jake's social circle grew too. He joined a hiking group, bonding with strangers over muddy trails and shared snacks. One member, Clara, a 34-year-old literature teacher, became friend. They chat about books during breaks, her passion for stories sparking Jake's curiosity. He started reading again, swapping sci-fi novels with her. Clara knew nothing of his past, and that was liberating. She saw him as Jake, not the guy betrayed by his wife. Their friendship was easy, with no pressure, though Nate, his college buddy, teased about sparks. Jake laughed it off, content to let things unfold naturally. Emma's life, meanwhile, had unraveled. She'd taken a leave from Seattle Children's Hospital, then resigned when gossip about her affair with Ethan Carter persisted. Jake heard through Nate's wife that Emma had moved to Tacoma, living with a cousin and working part-time at a clinic. She tried contacting Jake one last time, 3 months ago, sending a text from a new number. "I'm in therapy. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're okay." Jake read it, felt nothing, and deleted it. Her apology was too late, more about her guilt than his healing. He didn't hate her. He simply didn't care anymore. Sarah Carter, Jake's ally in the confrontation, had moved forward too. She finalized her divorce from Ethan and relocated to Denver for a new marketing job. They texted occasionally, checking in like comrades after a battle. Sarah shared that Ethan's consulting business had tanked after losing clients, and he'd moved back to Chicago, tail between his legs. "Karma's quiet, but it works," she wrote. Jake agreed, but he no longer dwelled on their ex's downfall. His energy was for building, not breaking. Professionally, Jake thrived. The kids' coding app launched in 3 schools, with teachers praising its intuitive design. TechWave offered him a lead role on a new project, but Jake negotiated part-time remote work to balance his life. He wanted time for hiking Max and exploring who he was beyond the office. His solo trips to the Olympics became a ritual, each trail a chance to reflect. On one hike, he journaled for the first time, scribbling thoughts about trust, resilience, and starting over. The words flowed, raw and honest, and he kept the notebook in his pack, a quiet companion. One Sunday, Clara invited Jake to a local book fair in Fremont. They wandered stalls, debating classic novels versus modern thrillers. Over coffee afterward, she asked about his life before Seattle. Jake shared the broad strokes: Divorce, a tough year, moving forward, without lingering on details. Clara listened, then said, "You seem like someone who doesn't give up." Her words stuck with him, a reminder of his strength. They parted with plans to hike together, Max included, and Jake drove home smiling, the possibility of something new flickering. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. Nate forwarded a message from a mutual friend, a photo of Emma at a Tacoma coffee shop, sitting alone, scrolling her phone. The friend captioned it, "She looks lost." Jake stared at the image, waiting for anger or pity, but felt only distance. Emma was a stranger now, her choice is a chapter he'd closed. He deleted the photo and took Max for a run, the rhythm of his steps syncing with his thoughts. Betrayal had broken him, but also forced him to rebuild stronger. That evening, Jake sat on his balcony, Max at his feet, and opened his journal. He wrote about the trail, Clara's laugh, the app success. Then, unprompted, he added, "I'm free. Not because they lost, but because I chose me." He closed the notebook, the words settling like a vow. The affair, the confrontation, the divorce, they were scars, not wounds. They'd shaped him, but didn't define him. As spring turned to summer, Jake's life bloomed. The hiking group planned a group trip to Mount Rainier, and Clara signed up, texting Jake a goofy photo of her new hiking boots. His app expanded to 5 more schools, and TechWave pitched it to a national education conference. Sarah sent a photo from Denver, standing on a mountain trail, her smile fierce. "We made it," she wrote. Jake replied with a thumbs up, proud of them both. The moral wasn't about revenge, it was about rising. Emma and Ethan faced consequences, not because Jake or Sarah sought destruction, but because truth has weight. Jake learned that betrayal, as brutal as it was, could be a catalyst. It stripped away illusions, forcing him to face himself. He chose growth over bitterness, action over regret. Standing on that Olympic trail, Max chasing a stick, Jake knew he was whole. Not perfect, not unscathed, but whole.